this last 6 months, I have been working on Elixir so intensively that I have learned a lot of things. So I hope this talk will be helpful for those who have the same concerns as me that I had a few months ago when I started this project. So let me introduce myself. I'm Miguel Michelson. I'm from Santiago de Chile. I have been the last 20 years working in web applications, 17 years working specialized in the Ruby on Rails development. So this time I have been more like a power user of the framework than a core committer of Rails framework. And I've made dozens of applications. I've entered the Rails world when it was on version 1. So I did a lot of rewrites and upgrades of the code, like from version 1 to version 2, version 2 to version 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 6, 7. So I really love Ruby on Rails. Don't get me wrong. This is my first choice when I do applications. So, but now then I'm entering the Elixir world, I'm loving this language too. So what is this talk about? Well, I will be talking about porting Chaskiq. And Chaskiq is like an open source alternative to Intercom. It's of course a Rails application. Right now it's a Rails application running in Rails 7 version. This platform is, in a nutshell, an alternative to Intercom. So it's like a live chat application with CRM capabilities, like platforms like Intercom, Zendesk, Drift, and others. It's the front line of the customer experience. Of course, there's the live chat. You can, I don't know, you can chat, of course. And it has many functionalities underneath. You can have more than 30 plugins to connect with various channels or conversational experiences. So it has an integration with Zoom, Calendly, Zapier, WhatsApp, Facebook, and you name it, Slack channels and all that stuff. So it also has some plugin architecture that lets the user to extend the application or the conversational experience, and also the agent side panel. So you can just pass some JSON data and extend the application and draw your own UI, right? So that's Chaskiq. So the main functionalities or the main stack is an API of GraphQL. It has all the front end written in React. It has an OAuth 2 based authentication, so it has some OAuth 2 provider built in. It has a segments or context filtering with some complex URL querying. It has a chat flows or chat bots in which you can compose your own conversational paths. It has internationalization. It has an inbox or email handling to receive the emails in the application, so you could use the application as an inbox. We relied a lot on ActiveStorage library. That's a library from Ruby on Rails to upload files and generate representations and variants of the files. It's heavily tested. It has unit test and integration test via Cypress. As I said, it has a plugin architecture with some kind of surface mode API. It has 30 plugins already built in, and you can connect your own external services to the application. So the main stack is front end in React and the back end in GraphQL. And that's what I call the pre-pandemic stack, because mainly this stack is like 2017 maybe, and it's a more complex stack. Certainly it takes a lot more to develop applications in this stack. than the newest stack like Livewire or LiveView, sorry, or Hotwire. But it has a bright side because the React applications or the single page applications are somewhat portable. So in this rewrite, I just have the 50% of the work done because of that. I already had my my front end already made, right? So I just only this rewrite only involves the generation and the development of the backend side. So. Well, why? What's my motivation here? Because Chaskiq is already done. It has 3 years old. It has no noticeable performance bottlenecks. I would say the performance is it's quite under 60 millisecond responses in the mean responses, so it's quite okay. Yeah, certainly for a Rails developer that has more than 10 years working Rails, it's almost impossible to not know the great job and the contributions that Jose Valim did when he was part of the Rails core and Plataforma Tech. So yeah, if he did a new language, I just believe him. And over the years, I've been keeping an eye on the progress of this language. So I had some notions on the language niceties, right? Of course, the speed is not the fastest language, we know that, but is a way faster than Ruby. Is a stable language. It allows you to create highly concurrent applications. It has the resilience built in. It has the great platform that's OTP, the Open Telecom platform, and it has a really friendly syntax that's important for a Rubyist, right? So with all that in mind, I just needed some pretext to start something real on Elixir, because usually my learning processes are more like learning by doing something real than reading books or doing some code challenge. And so that's my thing. So when I started to consider this project, my gut told me that it was probably a bad idea to do this. And it probably is. Because yeah, you know, in the startup and entrepreneur literature, you have this Netscape story in which the Netscape, when it was finally released over 3 years later than in the development, it was a buggy framework. It was slow, and the market share of Netscape was totally dimmed to practically nothing. And yeah. Internet Explorer, it's the word. So, but in our case, my rewrite should only take 2 months, right? So, so yeah, as I told you before, the performance issues in Rails in my Chaskiq application are not really noticeable. So my main motivation is not really the speed, the need of speed or the need of scalability. At this point, the application is doing just fine with the web load. So so yeah, what's my motivation really to doing this? Well, I just say that it's just for fun. It's really, Elixir is a really beautiful language and give us a lot of greatness for free. And so you can have highly scalable application by writing beautiful code. And that's, for me, I'm just sold. So which were my main concerns on make this big rewrite? The first thing that I did, of course, was read the docs. So I will suggest that if you are in the same spot than me, do the same. The documentation is really concise and easy to grasp. But also I've searched the internet for the alternatives of my dependencies on gems, right? Because, you know, Rails developer rely a lot on their gems, the Ruby packages. So we really like the magic of the libraries that does many things underneath without being worried about what it does really. So probably if I had to rewrite many of these dependencies, I wouldn't do this big rewrite of the application. So for my surprise, of course, the actual state of the art on Elixir has nothing to envy to the Rails packages ecosystem. So this will be a quick mapping on the alternatives. So for the authentication in the Chaskiq Ruby version, I use device, of course, written by Jose Valim, and the doorkeeper that is an OAuth 2 provider. And this OAuth 2 provider is really important for my application because it allows to users login, but also allows to the externals application that communicates via API to log into. So yeah, I had the variant on Elixir, so this was great. Then we have the API, and in the API we use GraphQL. So of course I found the great Absinthe library that is really a pleasure to work with. In the database ORM, we have a lot of ORM extension of the behavior of the models, like acts as list, acts as taggable, state machine, pagination, friendly ID, that's like sluggable records, and globalized that translates the one record in multiple versions of languages. So we have all that too in Elixir, and not just one alternative, but several alternatives per library. So that's really good thing to know. Request middlewares, the same. We use GeoIP, geocoder. We have an alternative for that too, so that's great. The email, we have great alternatives like Swoosh, for example. It's like some kind of action mailer. We have the mail package that enables us to inspect the body of the email. For example, the body, the content, the attachments, and all that stuff. We have the Premailx, it's a library that renders the email and generates the HTML for inlining the styles of the CSS in an email compatible way. So that's great. That was really important too in my application. So we have that too. We have the internationalization. So I've choose something that's more near to the Rails world because Phoenix has integrated the get text, but the get text is not some compatible with my application at least. So I didn't want to rewrite so much in the front end or the back end. So I choose this alternative that's more similar to what we have in Ruby land. Background jobs, I choose the O1 library, and I get rid on the Redis dependence. So that's a really good thing too. It's one database less to depend on. So that's really great. And for file uploads or image processing, the ActiveStorage is a library that's so complete that I didn't find an alternative. I did find at least 4 alternatives to upload files, but I didn't find a library that has all the functionalities that ActiveStorage has. So this will get into this a little bit later in this talk. So let's continue. How to start this rewrite, because the application is big. It has many layers, many parts. So I will suggest this as I gather some information from the community over these months. I really asked a lot of questions on this Slack group and forums. So yeah, I've seen a really friendly community that's with people that are really willing to help newbies like me. So that's amazing. So just to start, this is a suggestion, but just start with no Elixir fanciness, no OTP, no agents, no gen servers. So at least on the surface, you will not be using that. But behind the scenes, if you use Phoenix or use other libraries, you will be using the concurrent power of Elixir. So you will be using processes and supervisors and all that stuff. But at the beginning, don't use that. So start with the tiny bits of your applications. Choose to translate those files that are really atomized and isolated, maybe service objects or modules that have only static methods. Try to port its tests too, but keep the scope limited to that. Don't mess with dependencies yet. Just do some proof of concept so you can gain some confidence and get excited about your progress. And of course, at this stage, don't use metaprogramming and read the Elixir docs. So some notes on debugging. One of the things that Rubies do a lot is debugging with this bindic.pry or debugger. So in Elixir, you have at least 3 ways to debug application, and the most Rubyist way is to use the ix-pry. So for Elixir Pry to work, you must start the application with the ix-s. So that will be true to run the server or to run the tests or even to run the console itself. This require ix.pry is a little bit verbose, so you could have some VS Code snippet so you can speed that up. In the Rails console, when you update your code, you have the reload method, and in the IX console, you have the recompile. So if you make changes, you can recompile the code, and the code will be refreshed. To continue the execution on the debugging, you use the respawn, right? Another thing that is interesting is the dynamic module call. So I use this a lot in Chaskiq. So it's basically to take a string and convert that in an actual class or module. So in Elixir, you have the module concat, okay? And the other thing that I use a lot, and in Ruby you will see a lot, is and that's a missing thing in Elixir, is the named params. Whereas in Ruby you could add the named params with the default values. In Elixir you don't have that. But in the other hand, you have a powerful pattern matching, but it doesn't have the default attributes or named params. So this is a little pattern that I've found in which you can use an empty list as a default parameter and then fill the keyword list as a default and then merge that into the options, so you could use that if it were Ruby. So when you translate actual Ruby code, this will be really useful. So service objects and testing. So as I told you, yeah, I've started with some service objects or really isolated code. So this is an example of a module in Ruby that detects an European country, and it will return true or false if the country match, right? The code is really easy to understand. And this is the code translated to Elixir. So it's a little bit more verbose, but it's really readable and beautiful too. So there's an inclusion of the pipeline operator, and you have the enum here, and it's quite beautiful. But basically, it's almost the same, and it's really good. So then I started to port the tests of these files, and you can see the resemblance of mini test or RSpec in Elixir integrated testing. Then the next step that I did is one more level of complexity, but keeping the things isolated too, or choosing those code that was isolated. So one of the things that worried me was this specific functionality of Chaskiq that enables developers to build their own plugins. In order to extend the functionalities of the conversations or the agent panel itself. So what this does is the user pass a JSON format or a JSON structure. So this will end being rendered in the UI, right? So you could add, I don't know, a button, a payment button that interacts with your own backend, or I don't know, a select list or a checkbox or a message text or whatever you like. So you can build your own interaction flows. So in order to validate those JSON structures, I'd use a library that's called Active Model in the Ruby side, right? So this Active Model, it's a library that includes many of the functionality of the ORM, the ActiveRecord, but like validation, callbacks, attribute methods, and so on, but without necessarily tying these objects to an actual database, right? So that's the great thing about Active Model. So I quickly discovered that Ecto, the ORM of Elixir, has at least two main APIs to map external data into Elixir structs and treat that data without necessarily tie that into the database. So that's exactly what I needed. So I discovered the embedded schemas. And for example, this is an example of the spacer element on the Chaskiq application on the Ruby side. As you can see, the code is really easy to understand. It includes the active model validations. It has an accessors. It has then a validation of the size with validating the inclusion of these strings, these types, and it initialized with some attributes here. And this is the example of the same in the Elixir schemas. As you can see, it's a little more verbose, but it's more explicit too. You declare your embedded schema here. You have the required and optional fields, and you have this chain set, right? So this is a really important thing in Ecto ORM. So are quite similar. So that was really easy to port. So I started to port also each test on that implementation. And it's an exercise of translation than a reinterpretation. So it was fast. So after a couple of days, I had all the components implemented, like input, image, drop down, single select, and all that stuff. So this was a really big win in my process of rewrite the entire application, because I've started to complete things without even touch the database or operate with the web framework itself. So it was just another isolated feature that was tested in a very itemized way. So then after complete that, I've started to complete also other service objects. So after a week or so, I had all those tiny bits already implemented in the Elixir application. So that was really, really fast. So some notes on the ORM, the Ecto versus ActiveRecord. The ActiveRecord is somewhat, they're really similar, but they are different beasts. Our ActiveRecord implements the ActiveRecord pattern. It's more simplistic. It's more integrated library to interact with a database. By the other hand, you have this Ecto that implements the repository pattern, and it encourages the separation of concerns and the explicitness. So it's a little more verbose, but at the end of the day, it serves to the same purpose. So you have the chain sets, and the chain sets allow the casting and the validation and the definition of constraints when manipulating the structs or the data. So it allows to handle both data that is internal of your application or external, like forms or stuff like that. So the good thing about chain sets is that you can have many chain sets, and you can separate the data handling in a more clear and concise way than ActiveRecord. So chain sets are not ActiveRecord callbacks. So you will kind of miss those before save, before create, after save, and stuff like that. So the chain set could serve as a way to prepare the information and run some some side effects. So it could seen as a before save create, but for the after create or the side effect that occurs after you commit the database, you have a new data structure that's called the ectomulti, and the ectomulti is a data structure for grouping the multiple rep operations. So if one operation fails, all the transactions is rolled back, and if all the operations are valid, then all operations will be executed in the order that they were added. So also multi allows to run arbitrary functions as part of the transaction via the run method. So also you have, in querying Ecto, you have some really powerful way to query, just like the ActiveRecord and the RL libraries in Ruby. I would say that's a little more explicit. So you must be explicit in terms of how to preload associations. So in Ruby, you can shoot in your feed because it's automatically, all the associations are automatically preload. So in Ecto, you have to be more explicit. The querying system allows the composability, so you can add many queries in separate functions and change that. This is an example of querying ActiveRecord. As you see, it's more implicit preload, and is chainable too. In Elixir, you have the query composition. So yeah, you can really build complex queries even with dynamic fragments of SQL. So in order to not write raw SQL. So yeah, I've just poured some really complex queries that Chaskiq has in the application. So yeah, it's really a really powerful and good solution. So the API GraphQL. So now that I had my service objects done and my model layer baked up, it was time to implement the API endpoints that will bring the app to life. right? So the good thing about the GraphQL in the Elixir version is that the pattern matching, and that's a feature included in the language itself, makes the implementation of this really secure by default. So, for example, this resolver in this field of GraphQL lets you pattern match some params. So, for example, this example, if there isn't a current agent asking for this resource, then this method will not resolve. So it's a really good approach to work with GraphQL in Elixir. So yeah, these are more examples on how similar are the implementation of the field writing or the typings writing in the GraphQL or the Elixir. They're really similar. So I've just started to copy the initial structure of the GraphQL in the Ruby side. So I've just copied the code almost verbatim. And when I needed to put some logic on the types, I've just added some dummy information. So in order to have valid API responses with some dummy data. So in days I had the API working. So the already made front end started to work. So the application started to work just magically. So in summary, GraphQL integration used dummy types at first. Resolvers lead me to write more backend tests. So I've started to implement more and more logic eventually. And step by step, your single page application started to come alive. So what I really did in 2 months, well, actually in 4 months, I had a fully working application. I didn't implement any plugins, but I did implement the plugin architecture that will support that plugin creation. A 7 times speed up in the test suite, so that's really fast, and perceived speed on development, and kind of 95% of specs passing the test. So that's really good. Performance, well, this implementation was not the most performance-oriented port. It really was just a translation in many terms. So you can see here the Ruby test suite takes at least 10 minutes to run, and in Elixir just take 60 seconds. So that's really amazing, really amazing. So 7 times faster tests. The preliminary stats on my deployed application is the consumption under the 130 megabytes. So that's really good. And well, this is the demo. Let's see if it's work. Okay, this is chat. I will start a conversation. Hello. Woohoo! Yeah, I'm a customer. Okay, thank you. Great. And we can see here also the panel side. It will be really quick on this. Start the conversations. It's really working. Hello. Have the contacts here. These are the filters. You can show the profile. There are the campaigns all already built in. The routing bots. And yeah, this already implemented. So everything's it's here. There are no plugins right now, but it will be a next step or next iteration. But the core of the application is already here, already done. It's really, really fast. So I'm really happy and excited about this. So to continue with, what happened with ActiveStorage? Do you remember? So one of the things that I really miss from the Elixir was an integrated solution for uploading and processing files. I know that there are at least 4 alternatives to handle file uploadings, but I really get used to ActiveStorage, and as is a very powerful and really well integrated solution to handle not just uploads, but storage, mirroring, and versioning with an async or inline processing, also previewing files that are not necessarily visible or previewable, like video. For example, you can take screenshots of video or PDFs, and you can have the canonical URLs on your service that redirect to the cloud. So so there's no solution with all that functionalities in Elixir. So also, if you are going to migrate your Rails application with maybe thousands of uploaded files, porting that into another model could be a really time-consuming and a headache to migrate those images. So I wondered again, what would it take to port that to Elixir? So ActiveStorage, yeah, it allows you to upload the files to multiple services. It allows to have representations of the files, to have variants of the same file, to have preview, to have many analyzers for like audio, video, images, PDFs, to have the URL redirectings. So well, we ported this library too, with co-authored with Brian Underwood that I meet in the Slack group of Elixir, that he was also interested in porting this. So this is just more learning and more fun. So what I learned here, I learned about to build X packages to work with files in Elixir, like open the file, read the file, read the files in a binary string, how to work with some of metaprogramming in Elixir, and work with telemetry. And an interesting point, I've started to dig on the Rails core too. So at this point, I was highly trained to port the Ruby code from Chaskiq code base that was essentially my own design. But with this new port, I had to understand the design of a fairly complex Ruby library with lots of abstractions and Rubyisms. So it was fun, but not easy. I've chosen to port the complete design, so there's no kind of reinterpretation on an idiomatic Elixir. So it's just an implementation of the same structure to Elixir. Maybe it's not the most idiomatic, but at least it's on sync with the original version. So that's important in terms of for eventual follow-ups on the code. So also, I ported the test one by one, so I could be sure that the implementation is working as expected. So in work with files, I've learned that we could use, for example, this is an example of crypto library in Elixir that lets you create the hash with a stream, so you could be more efficient when you open a file or an IO stream, and start to concat this crypto hash, for example, and then encode that into base 64. So this is an image of me working side by side with the Elixir, the Ruby code and the Elixir code. So a lot of debugging and trying to understand how the library works. So at the end of the day, I've started to know the Rails core better. In terms of metaprogramming, of course, the Ruby libraries rely a lot on some obscure abstractions and metaprogramming. So I considered that was a good time to play a bit with Elixir. I know that this kind of discouraged by the Elixir community, but it's so interesting to work with metaprogramming. So I give it a try. So I started to know about the quote and unquote, and so this is kind of complex topic in Elixir. It's easy to get lost in this. So basically, the quote is about retrieving the inner representation of particular chunk of code, and the unquote is used in order to inject the value of the variable. So unquote has to be used inside the quoted representation. This really is easy to get dizzy on this. So metaprogramming in Elixir is hard to debug. So you cannot use the ix.pry inside quoted blocks. So as the Elixir authors suggest, you should avoid metaprogramming. But it's fun at the end of the day. So this is how I can use some as it were Ruby. I can import and extend an module from some metaprogramming. So some side effects on port a Rails gem. As you know, well, this will be the end of the journey, but I will mention that Rails is a really integrated framework, so that has many interdependencies. So ActiveStorage is not an isolated thing from the Rails context. So it depends on some other higher level libraries. So in ActiveStorage, there are at least 3 jobs, or like those background processing jobs that are used to analyze, to mirror, or purge the records. So these use a technology called ActiveJob. So ActiveJob is a framework of Rails for declaring jobs and making them run on a variety of queuing backends. So in the Ruby world, there is Chaskiq, Rescue, Delayed Job, and many more. And the nice thing about ActiveJob is that you give the user the option to connect their favorite backend service, so you don't impose a new dependence of if you are writing a library that needs some background processing. So the ActiveStorage has these 3 jobs. So I started to consider the possibility on port that too. So I came up with ActiveJob. And ActiveJob is a simplification of ActiveJob. It again takes the design of the library, and there are 2 integrations already built in this library that I choose as a queuing libraries, like Ovan and XQ. But adding more backends is really simple. So and also I've added 2 more backends that are intended for development, that is the inline and async. And this is the API to run a task on this ActiveJob library. So for example, this is an Ovan job that imports the queue adapter of Ovan, the Ovan adapter. And this is the way on how you can call and perform the job, like perform in background or perform now that it's performed inline. So yeah, as I told you, ActiveJob supports Ovan, XQ, and async. That's a really simple server for development and testing, and inline that runs the task inlining. So what I've learned here in this implementation, well, I've learned about gen servers. So That's really, really amazing. And a little bits on metaprogramming too. And one more thing, ActiveStorage relied on a gem called Marcel, and Marcel formerly was a mime magic. This gem does the work of detect mime types of the file by looking at the magic numbers or the magic bytes. So also there has 3 more strategies to recognize the content type as is by a string or file name or declared type. The library is very versatile and support hundreds of extensions. It's really complete and it does not depend on any external library. So it's a really, really precious gem. To be fair, there are other alternatives in Elixir, like MIME or file info or ximage or genmagic. But each of those has its own limitations and implementations. I consider that an implementation like Marcel will be great thing to have in the Elixir land. So at this stage, my Elixir powers had increased to the level that I was able to write this port in just 3 days. The library itself has a challenging part that involved to work with binary characters and compare it with the files. So the Slack community was really, really helpful here to give me some lights on how to debug the special characters and to understand the binary representations of the text. So this is an example of the Ruby code, which you have the Marcel mime type, you pass the IO and the file name content type. This is the Elixir version. That's really similar. So that's it. This is the API. It's really succinct and really great to work with. And what I've learned, well, debugging strings, work with strings and binary strings, and the use of ETS tables for catching this big dictionary of declarations, of definitions of the magic numbers and the magic bytes. So that's it. The library is on Chaskiq x Marcel too. So that's it, my friends. This is it. I hope you have enjoyed this talk and good afternoon.